She recently got a dog named after Japanese fermented soybeans, Natto. Can we see? Well, you're not on screen yet. Maybe we'll ask you to see the dog once you get on screen. So, everyone, please welcome Vivian.
Hi, everyone. My name is Vivian. I'm currently the senior data scientist at the City of LA, the mayor's office. So today I want to start by playing a game with you all. And I know it's a little cheesy, but I want to tell you a story. And as I go along the story, I will prompt and ask you to share how you feel by adding an emoji to the chat on Hopin, and we'll go along this journey. So I will prompt you as we go. It's a little cheesy. Feel free to play along or just sit and listen to this story. So the main character of our story is the firstborn in the R family. Their name is One. Okay. And so one day, one is walking along, and they encounter the firstborn of the Python family named Zero. And so they say, "Hey, we're both firstborns. Let's be friends." So then walking along, they want to go get ice cream. Now they're standing inside of an ice cream shop looking at the menu. They have 1 and 0 standing next to each other. And so what if I told you that this number represents how much money you have to spend in the ice cream shop? How does that make you feel? Go ahead and add an emoji into the chat of how, if you had $10 to spend on the ice cream shop, how would that make you feel? Am I seeing these emojis? Okay, no one wants to play my game. Jared is happy. Jared loves ice cream. I know that. I drew an ice cream cone on his wedding invitation. Okay, so, oh, there's a delay. Okay, that's okay. It's coming through. So we'll keep going on this journey. So next, they're walking along. They come across this bank, and Zero runs into their extended family. And they are so excited because they haven't seen each other in a while, and they line up to see how tall they are. Okay, so now this number represents how much money you just won from one of those like scratcher lottery games. So this is 10,000 free money that you just have in your bank account now. How does that make you feel? Share some emojis. I see smiley faces. I see celebration, free money. Sounds fun, right? Okay, and so over the years, some of Zero's family members have children, and now they're walking and they come in this neighborhood and they see your dream home. So they're standing outside, lined up, looking at your dream home, and this represents how much money it costs to buy your dream home, $1 million. How does that make you feel? Cheers, dollar signs. Okay, and so let's say one day One wants to go on a vacation, and so they say, "I'll have my sibling come in and help out and watch the kids," right? And so One leaves and Two comes over. So now this home is $2 million. How does that make you feel? Shock. Okay, I think you're getting the hang of this, so let's keep going. So what if instead of $2 million, this home was now $3 million? Continue to share emojis. Okay, so 3 million, starting to see some sweat. $4 million, popcorn. Okay, $5 million. Oh, I see some really intense eye emojis. $5 million. Now this home costs $5 million. How does that make you feel? Mind blown. Yeah, so I see a lot of mix of emojis. And so similarly, I had a journey as well, throwing up emojis, sad face. Yeah. I went through a similar journey. So this is how I felt going through the home analogy. When it was $1 million, I felt sad because I thought, I don't think any time within my near future I can have a $1 million home. $2 million seems even further. So I felt really, really despondent, right? Once I got to the 3 million point, it was completely beyond my realm of possibility. So instead of trying to think of how can I own this home, I can just stand in awe and admire how beautiful the home is. Then I got to 4 million. I started thinking, what are people doing in their lives that they can afford a $4 million home. And then it got to 5 million, and I just entered into this existential dread, right? Like, what am I doing with my life? How come I am not making that much money to have a $5 million home? So that was my journey. And I see kind of similarly, like the evolution of emojis that you all shared in the chat. Now, speaking of existential dread, what if that 5 million, instead of represented how much your home costs, it represented the number of global COVID deaths that we've experienced? How does that make you feel? Sad, right? I'm imagining sad. I feel sad when I hear that number. It feels like a crushing number of people. But how sad are we, right? It's the kind of sadness that stays with us when it's top of mind and we see it, but it's also the kind of sadness that kind of goes away when I move to the next slide. And I noticed this, in the US, when we reached our 100,000 deaths due to COVID in the US, the New York Times dedicated their front page to all those who passed, all the names and stories about each individual. And this was widely shared, right? A lot of people gave, shared on social media. There were special dedications and stuff like that when we reached this number. 4 months later, we reached 200,000. And it felt like people barely bat an eye. There are no longer any special kind of dedications or a moment that was around reaching this number. And I think that has something to do with how numbers scale in our mind. How do we really distinguish what 100,000 feels like compared to 2 million or 5 million? It's really difficult to tangibly feel what those numbers mean. And we kind of reach this threshold where, in our brains, we can't hold the truth of the number, the difference between like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 million. As data people, I think we understand the scale of it, and we really feel the difference when we're working with like numbers or data that is in that scale. But when we're just seeing the number on the screen, it just looks like one digit is changing. And then, the impact of that number is kind of lost. So most of the work that I do is trying to get a sense of that impact and really get a feel of what these numbers look like. Previously, when I was at Doctors Without Borders, my work was a lot around storytelling, creating illustrations and animations around the issues that we work on. And since I transitioned into a data scientist, my work looks more like this. I spent the past year and a half tracking COVID trends in LA City and building reports and dashboards that help inform the mayor, policymakers, and the general public around our current trends. And as I'm creating these tools, I think a lot about the game that we just played, how numbers for humans can both be impacted and desensitized to numbers at the same time. And going into the third year of our pandemic, I think about how do we keep these numbers relevant, truthful, and maintain a level of urgency where it can still command someone's attention, given the context of everything else people are dealing with. So today I want to share, pull back a little bit and share what I believe are the building blocks of design. This is not a talk about color theory or what charts to use. It's really going, what I think back to basics and sharing how to think like a designer. So in the design world, we spend the majority of the time not just understanding the problem, but understanding who is impacted by this issue. And I know you've heard it before, right? Everyone says, define your audience. And usually what I hear how people answer this, I hear, for example, the mayor or the CEO or, millennials who are about to be first-time parents. It kind of stops at that one line. And I want to share today, how a few questions that I use to help define my audience and how that framework can be helpful in informing the visuals that you create. So the questions that I explore are, one, who is your primary audience? How do you want them to feel? And what action do you want them to take? So what I mean by primary audience is really beyond their job title, right? What do they care about? what problem are they trying to solve? And something that I think is really important is what limitations are they working with? So everyone has some kind of time limitation, especially when you're creating things online. You're always going to be competing with people's attention span. Are there tech barriers that are limiting? Data literacy, right? Everyone, regardless of if you're a data scientist or not, has like some level of discomfort with numbers. And so, but as a designer, it's up to you to think about how do you adjust for that level of data literacy. Is there bureaucracy? So within an organization, maybe they really care about the issue, but they may not themselves have influence to be able to make decisions to change around that. And so if you identify that that is something that is impacting your audience, then that helps you go beyond and think, okay, who do they have to influence to help kind of change policy or to be able to make decisions? Next, I think a lot about feelings, obviously, and I think about one, like what emotions are they walking into this with? And just understanding that generally people have a discomfort with numbers, how they may be feeling timid or some kind of like imposter syndrome walking into something that is looking at really dense numbers, right? But when I think about if I have a chance to interact with something that I work on, how do I want them to feel walking away from this after having engaged with the report or the dashboard? And when I was doing work as an advocacy person, that emotion changed depending on what I was working on. Sometimes I really wanted people to feel angry and take action with us. Sometimes I wanted them to feel sad so then they can be empathetic and have a conversation around this. And oftentimes just maybe relief too that someone is working on this issue. If you are kind of stuck and you don't know how you want your audience member to feel, this is a philosophy that I've been kind of working on lately is if you don't know, opt for happy, like choose happy, right? The world is really, really dark these days and heavy. And if someone has a chance to interact with something that you create, why not give a moment of levity and lightness? And I don't mean that, you should do like rose tinted glasses. And if a report is really dense, kind of like change the numbers or, change the frame. So it's all light and happy and positive. What I mean by this is really giving a sense of kind of grasp over the numbers. So I think a lot about how people are uncomfortable with numbers. And so if I build a dashboard or a report for them, I want them to feel like confidence, like, oh, I understand what this means. I can then take away these numbers and trends and then be able to share that with someone else, right? I want them to feel confident about the numbers and not be so intimidated by it. So that's what I mean by happy. The next is, from there, like what action do you want them to take? Is it a one-time action? Is it ongoing? That helps me think through, okay, do I need to do like a one-off visual or graph or, I'm a shiny queen. And so I'm always saying, do you want a dashboard for this issue? What can they control versus who do they need to influence? And what's the key takeaway message? So these three questions are pretty basic and easy to answer. And I do this often with my team is I set time, just even 10 to 15 minutes to kind of brainstorm and sit together and say, if we're thinking about launching this product, who is our audience? And brainstorming with like all levels of my team, I open this up to everyone, not just the data scientists working on it. And because then you can go through each kind of audience member and understand like what are the key motivating points for this project, and then be able to kind of get different perspectives from everyone who is working on this. And so this is great to kind of start and launch a project, but then also it's a good reference to come back to as you are developing the product. Because, in the creative process, there is going to be ups and downs and, things will iterate and it may start to, change and evolve as you go. And using this as a reference to continue to come back and think through, is this still aligning with the things that we identified as important? from the beginning of this project, right? And sometimes, it's going to be hard to navigate that conversation, to think through, is it still aligning? How do we change and evolve it without shutting down ideas, right? So I want to end on just sharing some language that I have found useful, that helps me navigate those kind of conversations where you can still be creative and open and not have it shut down the process. So here are just language that I have found useful in thinking of sometimes when I see something, and in my mind I'm thinking, like, why is this here, right? But if you're on the receiving end of the why, I have often been on the receiving end, and it doesn't feel good. It feels like, there's no confidence in the work or the decisions that we're making. And so I have found it helpful to instead shift and say, can you help me understand how this is being used? And if you look at these lines here, the questions that I am suggesting is kind of more, how about if we tried this? Would it make a difference if we shifted, here to this to here, or change the colors? Tell me what you think about this, what's working. And the theme along all of this language suggestion is all around getting at helping people define, like, what is working, right? And if it is working, then let's keep that. But if that is not coming across, like, at a first glance, not intuitively, how can we evolve it so that it does feel intuitive for everyone who comes across it? And that way, you can continue to keep the core of what works, and then have it iterate and evolve without it shutting down, kind of keeping the conversation going. So I hope this was helpful. Feel free to take what you think is useful and evolve for how this might be helpful in the work that you do. Thank you.